Today we've got this Mercedes AMG GTR with us for some suspension upgrades. The AMG GTR has quite a few interesting features about it, one of which is the double wishbone front suspension system. So this is featured on a lot of supercars, and we recently did a video with the 992 GT3 Porsches who have moved across the double wishbone suspension system from a replacement strut. The main benefit of this is that you get more control in the design stages over camber, caster, camber gain settings and other aspects of geometry too. But one of the main fallbacks of a double wishbone is the amount of space required in the wheel arch to get the wishbones in there. So you need quite a lot more depth, which often on a front engine car brings issues into question of where the engine can go and how much engine bay width is available. However, with the AMG GTR, that leads into quite a cool other aspect of the car, which despite being front engined, is technically a mid-engined supercar. So the whole engine is actually behind the struts on the front and sits between the two suspension systems, making this car actually mid-engined. The way they've achieved this is by putting the gearbox at the rear of the car, allowing them to push the engine backwards towards the bulkhead, giving a lot more space in the engine bay, but not only that, it gives the mass distribution a much more even balance. So moving the gearbox rearward takes a huge lump of mass and puts that over the rear axle, which would otherwise be over the front. So usually in a car like this, you'd see a front engine, front gearbox and a driver sat in the middle, which puts a lot of nose weight onto the car, meaning at the back we lose grip and we lose traction and we lose a lot of balance in the corners. But moving the mass rearward and then shifting the engine backwards gives this car an almost exact 50-50 weight distribution front to rear, which gives much more even balance and much more even levels of grip, making this car so capable and why they're such a fan favourite in terms of driving feel and driving position, because it all ties together to give a really nice level of driving feedback and confidence to the steering wheel. This car also generated quite a lot of active ingredients into the mix. So up at the front, we have active dampers and active engine mounts. So the active dampers work like many active dampers do, where you press the button inside and they have varying levels of stiffness. This is done by electronic valving inside the damper that effectively open and close. So the more sporty you take the suspension, the more the valving closes, making that damper firmer, and meaning that through the corners, it gives less movement at higher speed. So it basically makes the car feel a lot stiffer and it reacts to inputs a lot faster. So if the damper closes the valve and it goes stiffer through the corner, the car will wallow less and it will settle onto the tyre faster and make the car have a much more dynamic approach. But over bumps, it's going to feel a lot firmer. So that's why on the roads, you want to go into the softer settings to absorb the bumps and keep the tyre in contact with the ground as much as possible. The active engine mounts come into play. So they have electronic valve inside them again, so they can be firmer or stiffer. And what this does is, it's actually mapped in and similar on the Porsches, where the throttle imbalance, so as the engine is rotating on throttle, it can account for that. So mid-corner, if throttle is applied, it can account for the rotation, the torque of the engine, and take that torque input out of the chassis, and the engine mounts will actually absorb that. So it means that on throttle, it doesn't upset the balance of the car, which is really tricky. McLarens do that as well. They also control the movement of the engine. So if you approach a corner at really high speed and just turn in, the mass of the engine has momentum in it, it has inertia. So it's going to want to rotate itself as its own entity. So what the engine mounts can do is as you turn in, they can stiffen the engine mount to stop the engine rotating over, which would otherwise be a big mass transfer, a big weight going around that stops that happening over the front wheels to give a lot more stability at high speed. Amongst other things today, we're going to be increasing the camber on this AMG GTR with our AMG GTR camber shims. So the reason we're going to be doing that is to give more grip from the tyre through the corners, especially with this car being pushed quite hard on the road and some use on track. We want to get as much grip from the tyre as physically possible. So if you imagine the wheel is vertical, like in this example, so 0 degrees of camber, it's fully stood up. As the car approaches and enters the corner, the car is going to lean across and it's going to start falling off the tyre like this. So if there's not enough negative camber in the first place to compensate for that, it's always going to lean over too much and it's going to work the outside edge of the tyre here, and that's how much grip you're going to have. So what we're aiming for is through the corner to have this much grip. So you want to get the camber setting right in a straight line where all of the tyres are in contact with the floor through the corner. It generates much more grip because there's physically more tyre in contact with the ground through the corner. So if we start with the car with negative camber like this is obviously exaggerated for the purposes of the video, but if we start off with negative camber like this, as we approach and enter the corner, the car is going to start leaning over towards the apex, and what we're aiming for is, as the car is settled in the corner, the tyre is completely flat through the corner, and then again we're exiting the corner, back off the tyre, and back in a straight line. So when we achieve that exact flat patch through the corner, we've got the camber setting absolutely nailed. This can be tweaked and played with, because often if that is an optimum camber setting, you might not have enough grip in the straight line if you're using too much negative to achieve that. So it is a fine tune between different tyres and different uses to get the exact setting, but ultimately that's what we're aiming to achieve. So the way we're going to achieve that on the AMG GTR is we're going to be fitting some camber shims into subframe. So on the AMG GTR chassis and quite a few of the Mercedes models, they make these shims from factory, and they've got different number stamps in them that have different positions for this slot in the middle that move in or out. And when they're inserted in the chassis, they effectively push the lower wishbone in and out, giving more or less negative camber. So we make our own at specified thicknesses that we can insert. It's going to not only increase camber, but it's also going to increase the caster, because we can fit thinner ones at the rear, which slightly pivot the wishbone, pushing the ball joint further forward at the bottom, giving more caster in the system as well. The reason we're looking for more caster in the system is it gives something called dynamic camber gain. So as we talked about before, you have a static camber setting, and it's aimed to get through the corner onto the flat patch. However, what caster gives is dynamic camber gain. That means as the wheel is turned on the front wheel, it also gives camber, so fall over like that. So it's giving dynamic camber gain. This is useful because it means in a straight line we can run less static camber, so we can stand the wheel up more for more braking traction or more on throttle traction. But as the car goes through the corner and the wheel is turned, the camber is increased and it gives that contact patch for the tyres to lean onto and gain that grip at the front end. It also has other added benefits such as increased steering feel and feedback to the driver, but that's the main thing we're looking for when we're adding caster into the system. So that's the AMG GTR all finished up with our camber gas shims installed. We finished that with a full fast road geometry alignment as well to get some aggressive fast road settings on the car. It's going to give more traction, more high speed stability, much more grip through the corners from the front and the rear, so it can carry a lot more pace and give a lot more confidence back through to the driver, especially pushing on hard on the roads and on track.